So I wrote this blog post a couple months ago about how to secure your Bitcoin wallet, and it was really just intended to be sort of a general introduction to some best practices, although it's received and continues to receive quite a bit of traffic. Now, some people have asked me if I could go into more detail about how to create a secure cold storage wallet. And doing so is kind of outside the scope of what I could do in a blog post, so I decided to make a little video tutorial for you guys. Now, as I mentioned in this post, the most secure way to create a cold storage wallet is to use a second computer. If you have a second computer that you're committed to keeping offline permanently, never reconnected to the internet, you could just generate your keys on that computer and then send your bitcoins over to those addresses, and as long as you never reconnect that computer to the internet, it should be impossible for an attacker to steal your bitcoins. Unfortunately, if you're like most people, you don't have access to a second computer that you can keep offline. So this tutorial is for you. I'm going to show you how to use your home computer to securely create a cold storage wallet. Now, I'm going to be demonstrating how to do this in Windows, but you could just as easily do this in OS X or Ubuntu. The steps are pretty much going to be exactly the same. Now, what you need to keep in mind is we need to assume that your computer is compromised, right? Especially if you're using Windows, which is just riddled with malware. You wouldn't want to create a new Bitcoin wallet on a compromised computer. Doing so would just unnecessarily put your Bitcoins at risk. So what we're going to do is we're going to boot into a temporary operating system that we're going to use to isolate our work environment from any malware that might already exist on this computer. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do. To start, you're going to have to get yourself 2 USB flash drives, at least 2. If you want to keep more backups of your keys, you might want to get a couple more. And we're going to install a Linux Live system, an operating system, on one of those flash drives, right? So it's not going to install on your computer's hard drive. We're going to install it on a flash drive, and we're going to boot into that operating system directly from the flash drive. So first thing we need to do is download the operating system, and the operating system we're going to use for this purpose is Tails. Okay, Tails is a Linux live system. It stands for the Amnesic Incognito Live System. Here's the URL here, or you could just Google it. The reason why I recommend Tails as opposed to any of the other Linux distributions is because Tails is specifically configured to prevent security leaks, right? So we're not going to be using the internet when we're in Tails, but if you do, all of your internet traffic is encrypted and routed through Tor. Tails, it doesn't use your computer's hard drive at all. So the entire operating system loads entirely in the memory. And what that means is if you get any malware while you're using Tails, or if there are any records of the keys that you generated while you're in there, when you restart your computer, the entire memory gets wiped, and there's no record of you ever using Tails at all. Okay, so this will completely protect you from any malware that you might already have on your computer. So to download Tails, we're just going to click this link over here, and then we are going to download the ISO file. Now, if you know how to use PGP, you probably want to download the signature as well and the Tails signing key. So you can verify the integrity of this ISO image. Now, if you don't know what PGP is, you know, it's probably a good idea to Google it, although a PGP tutorial is outside the scope of what we're doing here. You don't have to check the signature on the ISO file, but it is best practice to do so, just to make sure you're not getting a copy that somebody tampered with. Okay, I'm going to actually cancel this download. This download's going to take a while, and I already have a copy of it here on my hard drive. Next thing we have to download is something called Unibootin. Okay, you can just Google that as well. We're going to use Unibootin to mount the ISO file that we just downloaded to our flash drive. Okay, so I'm just going to pick your operating system and download it. Okay, and there it is. So these are the two things that we're going to need to load our operating system onto this flash drive. Now, before we do that, we are going to want to format our flash drive. So you're going to come over here, just pick your drive, right-click, hit Format. Most flash drives, I believe, come formatted as NTFS. You're going to want to select FAT32. I think if you do this while it's installed as NTFS, I think it's going to give you an error when you try and boot into Tails later. So you have to format it as FAT32. And then just hit Start. Now this is going to completely wipe the flash drive, so if you had anything important on there, you might want to move it onto your hard drive at this point. You can always move it back on later. Hit OK. OK, and formatting complete. Close this out. Now we're going to open Unibootin. Okay, there it is. And you're just going to check this disk image, and we're just going to select our ISO file that we downloaded. This is our Tails operating system. And then you would just select USB drive and pick your drive. Mine is the G drive, so everything is fine. I'm just going to hit OK. And there it goes. So it's installing on the flash drive right now. I'm just going to let that go. Now, the final thing that we need is we're going to need some way of generating the new Bitcoin addresses once we are in Tails. Now, in theory, you could use any Linux version of Bitcoin wallet, but probably the easiest way to do this is to just download a JavaScript file and run it in the browser. So we're going to come over here to bitaddress.org. Okay, now the thing to keep in mind, if you're ever using a browser to generate Bitcoin addresses, you don't just want to generate the addresses in the browser, right? That's a really insecure way of going about doing it. Instead, we're going to download the source code for this web page. We're going to come over here to this link down here for the GitHub repository. We're going to click this download zip file. Okay, and I'm just going to extract this right here. Now, the only file you need out of this group is this one right here, the bitaddress.org HTML file. So at this point, I don't have a second flash drive to demonstrate with, but if you have your second flash drive handy, stick that flash drive into your computer and just drag and drop this file into your flash drive. Okay, and then we're gonna, when we get back into Tails, we're gonna load this in a browser and use it to generate our Bitcoin address. Now, let's see, is Unibootin done? No, not yet. Okay, now just like with the Tails ISO file, you can also check the signature. If you have PGP, you can check the signature on the bitaddress HTML file. You have his PGP key here, and there's also this version history. The version history is signed, so you could check the signature on this, and then the way that you actually would check the signature on the HTML file that you download is you would hash it with SHA-1 and just check it compared to the hash right here. Okay, how are we coming along here? Almost. Okay, that's it. So now we have the Tails operating system installed on our flash drive, on one flash drive. On the second flash drive, you should have this bitaddress.org HTML file, which we downloaded. And what we're going to do now is we are going to boot into Tails. Now, I'm not going to be able to keep recording while my computer restarts, so I'm going to have to restart the recording once we're in Tails. But before we do that, at this point you should probably go turn off your router. If you're using Wi-Fi, just go turn your router off. If you have a computer plugged into the internet, just unplug the cable. We're not going to need the internet at this point, and you don't want to be connected to the internet when we go into Tails anyway. We're just going to generate the new addresses completely offline. Now, you're just going to restart your computer like normal, and you're going to insert the Tails flash drive that we just created, the flash drive that has Tails installed on it. And the very first screen when your computer restarts, it's that weird looking screen. Mine shows like a Dell logo or something like that. It'll say F2 for setup and F12 for boot options. So just keep tapping F12. Just keep tapping it until a little menu comes up and it'll ask you, what do you want to boot from? Do you want to boot from a DVD, a USB drive? Select boot from USB, and Tails will do the rest. It'll boot entirely into that operating system. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do now, and I'm going to pause the recording, and I will see you back in Tails. Okay, so welcome back. Here we are in Tails. Now we're going to go ahead and generate our Bitcoin addresses while we're in here. So we're going to click on Computer, and then you should have your USB stick with the bit address file on it. Just click on that. And then here's the file. You can just go ahead and double click this and it should open in Iceweasel browser. Okay, and there you go. Alright, so we're going to click on Paper Wallet. Okay, and this will generate the paper wallets right here in the browser. You can see you got the Bitcoin address on the left-hand side and the private key on the right. Now, the only thing about the way this is formatted right here is that the private key is just sitting on the paper wallet in plain text, right? So if someone were to discover your stash of paper wallets, they could easily just steal your Bitcoin. So instead, what we are going to do is we are going to print these out using a BIP38 encrypted private key. All right, so we're going to check off BIP38 encrypt, and then we're going to select a passphrase. Now, you want this passphrase to be very, very long and random, so that it's difficult to brute force, right? If you're using normal letters and characters, maybe 14, 15 different characters. I'm just going to go with a default password here just to demonstrate. Now, how many paper wallets do you want to print out? I would suggest you probably shouldn't just print out one. And the reason for that is you don't want to send all of your Bitcoins to a single address. Because let's just say you own 100 Bitcoins, right? That's over $100,000. If let's say you just wanted to spend one Bitcoin, well, just to spend that one Bitcoin, you have to remove the entire amount from cold storage and import it into a hot wallet, putting your funds at risk, just to spend that one Bitcoin. So a better way of going about doing it would be to maybe generate 10 Bitcoin addresses and split up your funds between them, maybe 20, right? Maybe you want to do 5 Bitcoins on each address. It's really up to you, but it would be much better to do that than to put them all in a single paper wallet. Okay, so then you're just going to want to go and click on Generate. And then it's going to perform a number of tests to encrypt the keys. Okay, and there you go, and you'll see that the paper wallets turned blue. This is because they're now encrypted, right? And you'll see that the private key over here on the right hand side it now begins with the number 6, right? So any private key that begins with a 6 is an encrypted private key. If you were going to import this private key or import your cold storage addresses back into a wallet, most wallets will allow you to import a BIP38 private key. When you just copy and paste the key into the wallet, it'll prompt you for your password. So whatever passphrase you entered, you would just enter it at that point. Now, I say most wallets support the BIP38. It's probably not all of them at this point, but BIP38, it stands for Bitcoin Improvement Proposal. This is sort of a standard that has been developed, so I expect if all wallets don't support it right now, at some point in the future they will. Alright, so we're just going to click print here. Now, because we are in Tails, you don't have any printer drivers installed or anything like that. We're not going to be able to print directly from Tails. So instead, you're just going to click Print to File, and this is going to save it as a PDF. Okay, and you're just going to save it in your USB stick. And then when you click Print, it'll just save it. Alright, so you can close this out, and there you go. There's the PDF file on your USB stick. You open it up, there you are. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are going to restart back into Windows, and we're going to print out this PDF file. But we're not going to reconnect to the internet just yet, so your router should be off right now. When you restart into Windows, just keep it off and we'll reconnect later on. Okay, so to restart, you're just going to go click on this little icon in the top right over here and just hit reboot, and I'll do that and I'll see you back in Windows. Here we are back in our regular operating system. Notice we still haven't reconnected to the internet. We're not going to do that just yet. And the final thing we have to do is just print out the paper wallets that we created. Okay, should be right there on our flash drive, and there they are. So you're just going to click print. Now, if you typically connect to your printer through your Wi-Fi, that is, you use wireless printing, I'm going to recommend for this purpose that you connect to your printer with a USB cable rather than fiddling around with the Wi-Fi. And the reason for that is you don't want to connect to the internet and give an attacker the opportunity to snag this file. Okay, your private keys are encrypted, so unless they can get your password, they still shouldn't be able to spend your bitcoins, but you don't want to give them the opportunity to try to brute force your password. Okay, so just connect with a regular USB cable. After you print out this file, you're going to want to store your paper wallets in some way that protects them from moisture or from getting wet, so you might want to throw them in a plastic bag, or maybe laminate them, or whatever else you come up with. Okay. Now, you're also going to want to copy your Bitcoin addresses down somewhere. So you can copy them like this. It's kind of a little awkward. Or you could use the QR code. And just throw those Bitcoin addresses in a file, maybe store it on your desktop. That way you have them handy when you go to send the Bitcoins from your hot wallet to these paper wallets later on. Okay. Notice you're still going to have this PDF file on your USB drive, and I'm going to recommend keeping it there as a backup. Okay, so if anything happens to the paper wallets that you print out, you still have your flash drive as a backup. And again, you could use multiple flash drives here. If you wanted more than one backup, just copy this file to the other flash drives. Now, if someone does access your flash drives, they can open this file and they can at least know that you've got bitcoins on it. They won't be able to spend them because the keys are encrypted. But if you wanted to make it so that that there was no way to tell that this was a Bitcoin related file, you could just encrypt it, right? You could use AES, you could encrypt it with your PGP key, you could even use TrueCrypt to create a hidden volume on this flash drive and then just drag this file into the hidden volume, and then no one would even know that there's anything on those flash drives at all. But that's up to you. You can decide level of encryption you want to use. If you don't encrypt it, that's fine as well, because your private keys are already encrypted. So again, that's up to you. The last thing you have to do here before reconnecting to the internet is, obviously, you're going to remove your flash drive. Okay.
Hello, I'm Roger Veer, CEO of MemoryDealers.com. A little over 2 years ago, I made a bet for $10,000 that Bitcoin would outperform gold, silver, the US stock market, and the US dollar by more than 100 times over the next 2 years. I'm here today to say that I was wrong. In reality, it took about 2 years and 2 months for Bitcoin to outperform everything else by more than 100 times. Over that time, gold and silver are down. The stock market is up about 45%, but Bitcoin is up more than 15,000%, or more than 300 times everything else. In the preceding time, we have seen the use of Bitcoin spread to millions of users around the world. Bitcoin businesses such as BitPay, Coinbase, Blockchain.info, and more have received tens of millions of dollars in VC funding and are expanding their operations into countries around the globe. Shopping cart platforms like Shopify.com with over 70,000 stores have integrated Bitcoin as a payment method. Point-of-sale software companies have begun to integrate Bitcoin into their systems that will soon allow Bitcoin to be easily accepted at millions of physical locations. And localbitcoins.com already seems to have buyers and sellers in nearly every town on the planet. True business professionals are making Bitcoin projects their full-time jobs, and it is nearly impossible to read the financial news without hearing about Bitcoin. Because of all these exciting developments, I'm more confident than ever that Bitcoin is on its way to mainstream adoption and changing the lives of everyone on the planet for the better. However, since I was off by a few months regarding the time frame for the bet, I've decided to donate 1,000 Bitcoins that were worth only $10,000 at the time I made the bet, but are now worth well over $1 million US, to the organization that published the books and articles that allowed me to understand just how important Bitcoin would become. That organization is the Foundation for Economic Education, or FEE.org. By reading books and essays published by this organization from such intellectual giants as Murray Rothbard and others, I learned that those who want to control their neighbors' activities through the violence of the state are economically ignorant, morally deplorable, and will always fail to reach their desired goals. I will proudly continue to promote Bitcoin full-time because I see it as the best chance the world has ever seen at creating a more peaceful society in which all human interactions are voluntary and outside groups of people calling themselves the state are no longer able to violently interject themselves into the affairs of others. If these ideas are of interest to you, or you simply want to know more about my motivation for becoming involved with Bitcoin, I would ask you to Google voluntarism, the non-aggression principle, or read anything by Murray Rothbard. Most importantly, continue to use